The most widely accepted rumor in Warhammer 40k is that when the 2nd and 11th Legions were erased from history, Roboute Guilliman quietly absorbed their orphaned Space Marines into the Ultramarines. It explains why the Ultramarines' numbers swelled so massively. But there is a fatal biological flaw in that theory. If the 11th Primarch was a Null, a psychic blank engineered to counter the warp, that trait would be baked into his geneseed. If Guilliman had absorbed them, the Ultramarines would have been torn apart from the inside. Games Workshop has deliberately kept both Lost Primarchs undefined. Nothing in official canon identifies the 11th as a Null. What follows applies hard biological logic to a widely accepted piece of lore, and asks what the mechanics demand if the community theory is correct. The answer to that question isn't ambiguous. The absorption narrative collapses under its own weight, and the shape of the wreckage points towards something far more deliberate than an administrative cover-up for a failed Primarch. The theory took root because the arithmetic is almost irresistible. The Great Crusade begins around 798 M30. A galaxy-spanning military campaign organized across 4,287 primary expeditions. 20 legions operate in the Emperor's name. Each carries geneseed derived directly from one of 20 Primarchs, being sculpted from the Emperor's own genetic material, each designed with specific roles for the reconquest of the galaxy. For decades, all 20 fight and expand and bleed. Then, at some undated point before the heresy, 2 of them cease to exist in the record. The 2 and 11 legions and their Primarchs are subjected to the Edict of Obliteration, in High Gothic, the Damnatio Memoriae, the condemnation of memory. Names stripped from archives, records redacted, heraldry destroyed, symbols removed from every catalog, physical representations excised from every monument. No specific date survives for when this happened, no expedition number, no stated cause. By the time the chroniclers of the Horus Heresy begin their work in 005 M31, both legions are already absent from every accessible Imperial record, their existence reduced to a mathematical anomaly in the first founding. 20 Primarchs created, 18 still fighting, 2 numbered slots sitting empty in the roster between 1 and 3 like missing teeth in a carefully kept ledger. What survives is a correlation. Around the time the XIII and XI Legions were expunged from Imperial records, the Ultramarines Legion swelled in Astartes' numbers to eclipse all other legions. Not grew through steady recruitment, not expanded incrementally, swelled rapidly, dramatically, anomalously, to become the largest military force in recorded Imperial history. By 005 M31, the Ultramarines stand confirmed as much larger than any other legion. For a concrete reference, the Iron Warriors fielded roughly 180,000 Astartes before the heresy, and were specifically described as rivaling the Ultramarines in size. Rivaling implies the Ultramarines sat meaningfully above even that figure. Fan extrapolations place the 13th Legion closer to 250,000, though that specific number doesn't appear in first-party GW sources. The official language stays deliberately vague, which is itself worth noting. The official explanation for the 13th Legion scale is the 500 worlds of Ultramar, the largest and most productive recruitment base of any legion, managed by the most administratively capable Primarch in existence. Guilliman's 500 worlds provided a recruiting pool that no other legion could match. That explanation accounts for a large legion. It doesn't account for a sudden dramatic spike at precisely the moment 2 other legions stopped existing. The community connected those dots with straightforward logic. 2 legions disappear. 1 legion grows. The arithmetic produces one obvious answer. Guilliman absorbed the survivors.
Aaron Dembski-Bowden's The First Heretic adds texture to this theory. Characters from the Gal Vorbak, the elite word-bearers, discuss the Lost Legions and the Ultramarines in a scene the community treats as the primary textual anchor for the absorption narrative. The reality of what that scene contains is more constrained. The characters treat the Ultramarines' growth as a conspiracy theory. The others in the scene respond with skepticism. Even within the fiction, in a scene written by an author who knows exactly what he's doing with word-bearer's perspective, this is presented as an unverified rumor that in-universe characters dismiss as speculation. Dembski-Bowden has characterized the conversation as exactly what it appears to be on the page, character-level conjecture, not authorial revelation hidden in dialogue. None of that stopped the theory from crystallizing into near consensus. It fills a gap that no confirmed canonical explanation has ever filled. It makes the numbers work. It provides a rational motive for Guilliman. It gives the missing Marines somewhere to go. Ask anyone who has studied 40K lore seriously, and the vast majority will tell you the orphaned Astartes of the 2nd and 11 were folded quietly into the 13 Legion, their numbers inflating those already anomalous figures to their legendary scale. That consensus rests entirely on one assumption, that absorbing those Marines was biologically straightforward, that Guilliman could take them in, recolor their armor, integrate their geneseed into the Ultramarine gene pool, and proceed without consequence. The biology says otherwise, loudly. Every living human being in Warhammer 40K has a soul. That isn't a metaphor or a spiritual abstraction. It's a literal, physical phenomenon with observable, measurable mechanics. Every consciousness with any organic complexity registers in the warp, the parallel dimension of psychic energy and raw emotion that underlies real space, as a presence, a signature. Psychers burn the brightest. Their connection to the warp is strong enough that their souls appear as blazing brands in the immaterium, spiritual beacons visible across dimensional boundaries, drawing the active attention of entities that navigate by psychic light. Baseline humans register more dimly. Xenos register in different frequencies. Every mind, every soul, every being capable of self-awareness casts a shadow in that other place. A null casts nothing. A psychic blank, called variously an untouchable, a psychic null, a pariah, or a black soul depending on the severity of expression, generates no presence in the immaterium whatsoever. The soul doesn't flicker faintly. It doesn't register as dim. From the perspective of any entity that perceives through the warp, the blank simply does not exist. On the scale the Adeptus Astra Telepathica uses to classify psychic potential, running from alpha-level near godlike power down through epsilon, blanks sit entirely off the bottom, classified as omega-, a negative number on a positive scale. Anti-psychers, the systematic antithesis of everything psychic activity requires. A blank's presence in the warp is described in lore as resembling a black hole in the immaterium, not a wall that blocks, but a ravenous void that actively devours the psychic energies around it, pulling both warp entities and the soul substance of nearby beings toward a nothing that consumes rather than simply obstructs. A psyker who approaches a strong blank doesn't merely find their powers weakened. They find the dimensional substrate those powers draw from being actively drained toward the null's presence.
The connection between the immaterium and real space within the blank's area of effect isn't suppressed, it's severed. The pariah represents the furthest expression of this condition, individuals in whom the gene is fully dominant rather than partially expressed.
Their anti-psychic aura is so powerful that a baseline human finds it almost impossible to remain in their proximity. Not uncomfortable, not unpleasant, almost impossible. Demons, beings whose physical existence is entirely composed of warp energy, experience proximity to a strong null as acutely painful, painful enough to drive them back into the immaterium against their own tactical interests just to escape it. A Calexis assassin, the Officio Assassinorum's weapon built from the most powerful blanks available, causes absolute terror in all psychers, including, canonically, Tyrannid hive tyrants balking at the prospect of being permanently severed from the hive mind. The Sisters of Silence occupy the institutional apex of organized null deployment. Every member is a psychic null, selected from the strongest available candidates. Their operational value is determined by how far their void field extends and how completely it suppresses psychic activity in their vicinity. The most potent among them, the Frost Spider Vigilator cadre and the wider Silent Sisterhood specialist ranks, are trained into roles whose anti-psychic disruption renders any attempt at warp power in their presence acutely dangerous. Rather,